On July 4th, 1984, Six Flags AutoWorld in Flint, Michigan was opened to the public. One of the country's first indoor amusement parks, it cost $80 million to construct and stood as a beacon of hope and renewal for the people of Flint. Several years later, it was gone.
I believe that today, July 4th, 1984, is the first day of the rebirth of the great city of Flint.
In the late 70s, Flint, Michigan was a city struggling to survive. It was a city built by the automotive industry, much like Detroit. Large car companies like General Motors were beginning to take their manufacturing elsewhere, to other states or across the border to Mexico where labor was cheaper. That, coupled with the ongoing recession and the healing wounds left by the national gas crisis, countless residents of Flint found themselves unemployed and out of options. Something had to be done, but no one was quite sure what. Flint's cultural identity was built around cars. Its people had worked in the factories for generations, and their loyalty to Michigan's car companies was still strong despite years and years of layoffs and mistreatment. What began as a proposition to build an automobile hall of fame slowly morphed into a concept for a hybrid indoor theme park and museum based around the history of the car. During the planning process, Six Flags theme parks became associated with the project, entering into a contract to manage it for 10 years, giving the park the full title of Six Flags AutoWorld. Construction began in 1982. AutoWorld was comprised of two buildings, a newly constructed dome, and the old historical IMA Auditorium, originally built in 1929. In 1984, the old auditorium was given a new life, and AutoWorld opened its doors to the public for the first time. Inside, guests would be greeted by a scaled-down, idealized replica of Saginaw Street, the main hub of Flint's downtown area. On this street, similar to Main Street USA in the Magic Kingdom, there were various performers, shops, and food vendors for people to interact with. Beyond that, there were about a dozen attractions throughout the two buildings, such as an IMAX screen that showed a movie about humanity's need for speed, two dark rides, the humorous history of automobility, hosted by Fred the Carriageless Horse.
He's Fred the Carriageless Horse.
And the Great Race.
This ride will give you a driver's eye view of some of the greatest races in the world. No more watching from the sidelines. Here you take your place behind the wheel and you watch the world as it goes by.
There was a historic carousel and some bumper cars, but that was about it. No roller coasters, no thrill rides, no reason to come back. Early critics were concerned about the park's ability to attract return guests and the overall theme of the park. While the theme of automobiles in a city integral to their history initially seemed like a perfect fit, we can't forget that at the time of AutoWorld's opening, thousands of people were losing their jobs. People whose families had worked in the automotive industry for generations, who used to be able to rely on the good pay and hefty benefits offered to them, were suddenly left with nothing. While attendance for AutoWorld was initially strong, it quickly began to taper off in the following months. Just as feared, the park failed to entice Flint residents to return for consecutive visits, and tourists from outside the city found very little reason to go, despite a massive overhaul of the city that included new signage, a deluxe Hyatt hotel, and multiple shopping centers.
We've got some great facilities as far as places to stay, interesting places to see, museums, and it's a nice community to visit.
People didn't want to go to Flint. There were other places nearby that had more to offer, such as the colonial town of Crossroads Village and Frankenmuth, a quaint German tourist spot. AutoWorld moved to seasonal operation in December of 1984. By January 1985, the park was officially closed. It operated sporadically until 1994, and in 1997, the building was sold to the University of Michigan and imploded.
We are less than 1 minute from the implosion of Flint.
The narrative narrative surrounding Flint, Michigan is so often a negative one. In the public eye, Flint is oversaturated images of ruined, porn, and abandoned factories. Flint is crime. Flint is the water crisis. Why do the people stay? Why don't they leave? Why do people stay? The thing is, Flint is beautiful in its own way. Maybe not in the same way that other cities are beautiful. Flint's beauty comes from its rich history and its incredible community resources. The Sloan Museum, Longway Planetarium, and the Flint Institute of Art are all places integral to the community and accessible to the masses. Recently, in 2017, the historic Capitol Theater was reopened after its closure in 1996. In 2014, the Flint Farmers Market moved to the former site of the Flint Journal's printing press location and more than doubled its size. In 2013, what was once the tallest building in Flint, Genesee Towers, was imploded after lying abandoned for years. And while I was writing this script, the Sloan Museum underwent a several-year expansion and will reopen bigger and better than ever before. The city is almost unrecognizable from when I left it in 2012. But while a lot of progress has been made, there's still a long way to go, and there has been a lot of damage done to it. AutoWorld wasn't the solution to all of Flint's problems like the city had hoped, but it still lies as an interesting, relatively unknown moment in the history of one of America's most troubled cities. And that makes it worth remembering. At least we tried.